The Late Morning Program with Nam Ras Podcast.
Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Late Morning Program with Nam Ras, the number one Hare Krishna podcast in the world. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, good. It worked. So I'm here with Carucandra Prabhu. Carucandra Prabhu, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm honored to be on your show. Of course, this is the second highest honor you've ever bestowed upon me.
What was the first?
Well, you named both of your children after me. So.
Oh, that's right. Carucandra. I love it. That is so cool. Yeah, it's true. Beautiful name. Anyway, Carucandra Prabhu actually runs a self-sufficient project, or I don't know. We can get into it, but that's why I wanted to bring him on to kind of pick your brain about that kind of thing. So I'm hearing. Oh, sorry, that's me. Today is like technical. Yeah. Anyways, so Carucandra Prabhu, maybe we can start out by talking about how you got in contact with devotees, or actually no, before that, where you grew up and how that was, and then how you got contact with devotees.
Sure. So I grew up in Pennsylvania, about maybe like 40 minutes outside of Philly.
Okay.
Like I wouldn't even call it a suburb. When I lived, like now it's a suburb, but when I lived there, it was pretty rural still. A lot of my neighbors had farms, stuff like that. So that's where I grew up, like close to Philly, but far enough away where it's not city-like. And I came in contact with devotees. The short version of the story, because it can get pretty long, is when I was 13, I had like a eureka moment where, I saw that the people around me, they weren't really being genuine. They weren't being real. They would say certain things to, around other people. And then when they were around different people, they'd say something completely different.
Right.
And so, and I noticed this when I was really young, but when I was 13, I had this eureka moment. And this was like a spiritual thing. I was always looking for something real or something spiritual, something transcendental. And, like I said, when I was 13, I had this moment where I finally had something to gauge whether something was, genuine or not. And
right.
So what I was doing was I was sort of like observing. I was going to church and I would observe the congregation members and see if they actually took what they were learning, all the good information that they were learning, and actually living it, or if they were just sort of like,
saying that they were
right. And so what I found was that most people really weren't genuine about it. They had a degree of genuineness to them, but it wasn't their life. It was just something. It was something else. And so I wanted to find some people that actually, just did it full on. So I started going to, I was 13. So I started going to different friends' churches, and, I'd like sleep over their house on Saturday and go to their church on Sunday. And it was the same thing. I'd observe, and they're all saying really great stuff, but I just didn't see anybody that was actually living it. And then I had a friend, he was Jewish. And so I stayed over his house on a Friday night because they have temple on Saturday. Went to the temple there. Same thing, really cool. But, there were a few people that were pretty into it, but, not completely. And so then I started reading books, reading philosophies. I read about Hinduism, Islam, Buddhism, anything I can get my hands on, which meant like, my social studies textbook and like whatever was in the library at the time.
Right.
It wasn't really a vast search, but so after doing that for a few years, I kind of gave up the spiritual pursuit, and I went for I was kind of an adrenaline junkie for a bit, because I thought that, because material is, a certain level, and then transcendence is what I was looking for. So I thought that I misconceived that adrenaline was actually something transcendental, because you can't get it doing something normal. You have to like jump off a cliff, or like
that seems logical. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought, all right, well, this might be transcendence, and so I was chasing that for a while. And then obviously what I found out was, you know, you do these things and they give you adrenaline, but after you do them for a while, they don't produce that anymore. So you have to go bigger and you have to do more and more ridiculous stuff in order to get that feeling. So then I realized also that wasn't really transcendence. That was just like, you know, another step of material life.
What kind of things were they? Like you said, jumping off cliffs, or was it actually stuff like that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, into water. So
Right.
it wasn't like, you
Right,
know,
right. No, yeah, it's into water. Okay.
but like, you know, but you have to like jump higher and like you know, things like skateboarding where
Right.
you do tricks off of like sets of steps. So you're like, you know, 3 steps, 4 steps, 7 steps, and then, you know, and then you start realizing, well, this is really stupid because I can't get that feeling unless I do something like where I'm gonna really get hurt if I,
Yeah.
you know, don't stick it. So so that, you know, so then I realized, okay, this is also not transcendence, it's just something else. So for a bit I kind of just gave up and I was really bitter about everything. Like the whole world just ticked me off, you know,
Right.
and I didn't think there was really anything real. You know, I thought there's potential because I read about it, but I just couldn't find anybody that actually did it. So I couldn't, you know, communicate with anybody that was on that, you know, on that wavelength. And so, you know, so I gave up. And then this was when I was by this time I was 17, I was in high school. And I was in English class one day, and a fellow sitting in front of me, he had a shirt on, and on the back of the shirt, it said "Quest for Certainty." And I said, "Hey, I'm also on a quest for certainty. Tell me about yours." And he said, "Oh, it's actually this hardcore band." And I was like, "Oh, never mind, never mind. I don't need to hear about it." Because like actually back then, you wouldn't know it now, but when I was introduced to Krishna consciousness, I couldn't stand hardcore music. It just was like I couldn't understand what they were saying. Like, you know, it was just really like loud noise to me.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's changed a bit since then, but
Right.
my perception of it. But yeah, so I was like, yeah, never mind. I don't want to hear about it. You know, I was into like hip hop then. And he said, no, no, no. Actually, these guys don't worry about the hardcore part. These guys, they follow this traditional philosophy. It dates back really long. And you know, on Wednesdays in Philly, you can go and like hear them talk. You know, not them, but you can hear people talk about this philosophy that they're also preaching. So I said, all right, well, that I'll actually go. I'll check that out. You know. And
Wow.
so in Philly, at Govinda's, Hariyashra's place, they used to have a Wednesday night program. And so, you know, a few of us hopped in my car on a Wednesday. We went down. I heard my guru speak for the first time. He spoke on Brahmabhuta Prasanatma. I memorized the verse right then and there. It had such an impact on me. And I saw that the people who were there took it seriously to the point where they actually implemented it into their lives, you know?
Right.
And that was something that was very impressive to me. Now, I mean,
How did you determine that though?
because it's like they were like, okay, here are the rules of spirituality, and I could see that they were actually following them, and it was like, and it was presented in a way that, you know, you don't actually have to follow them, but if you want the result, this is how you have to do it. So it was a science, you know,
Right.
scientific process means here's the result that you want. You have to go through this process, and if you do it properly, you'll get there. If you do it improperly, you won't. And so I admired that because it wasn't, in other words, they weren't selling you like the highest goal for no effort whatsoever. They were like, well, it'll work, but this is what you have to do. And so there's no compromise on the philosophy. And so that's what I really admired.
Wow. So then did you join as a brahmachari, or how did it kind of develop you becoming a Hare Krishna?
So, well, I was 17 at the time, so I couldn't move into the temple.
Oh, 17. Wow.
Yeah. And so, well, I graduated at 17, and then I went off to art school for a bit, for like a semester and a half. And I realized that wasn't the career I wanted. Ironically, then I became an artist, but
Right.
I didn't want to do art for money. Art's an expressive thing, and it's something that, you know, it's something that doesn't make sense if you're doing it commercially, really,
Right.
for me anyway. So I realized that early on, and I dropped out of art school. So by that time I was 18, and I moved into the temple, and so I lived in Philly Temple for a year and a half before I went to Vrindavan for Bhakti Shastri. I went for 6 months, and then I went back to Philly for about 6 more months, and then I co-ran a preaching center in Long Branch, New Jersey, for a bit.
Oh, I remember that.
Were you there for that?
I wasn't there, but I remembered that someone was doing something there in Long Branch.
You must have been really young.
Yeah, I was really young, but I was like, oh, there's devotees doing that. What is that was that in the early 90s or mid 90s?
Yeah, 96 is when we started for,
Oh yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah, 96. Cool. And then how was the preaching? Like, how was the results there in Long Branch?
So it was preaching there was great. It was really good mood. A lot of the devotees that went there compared the mood to 26 Second Avenue, where it's very intimate, but it's you know, real deep philosophy. We had Bhakti Tirtha Swami was there. We had Brahmananda Prabhu come because at one point, when I don't know if you know this about Long Branch, but Srila Prabhupada spent some time in Long Branch, New Jersey.
Yes,
You know it?
yes.
Yeah.
I was just talking to Kula Pradeep about it. Actually,
Really?
we're like, we should go and try to find that house that he stayed in, but I don't know who would even know what the
Well,
address
we
was.
tried to find it. So
Oh,
Brahmananda
really?
was one of the ones that was there, and Govinda Dasi was there.
Yeah.
And so that's why we brought Brahmananda there. We were like, okay, look, we need to find this house, you know.
That's awesome.
And he was like, we're going around, and he's like, you know, so much of this neighborhood's changed, so we couldn't find it.
Oh man.
But we did have, you know, it was a great mood. And then what happened was, it was such a great mood that when it ended for whatever reason. We don't have to get into it, but
Yeah.
it spun off two separate other sanghas. There was the Brick Sangha, and then there was the Kalpas up in where would that have been? Elizabeth, I guess, at the time.
Right, right.
They would alternate weeks, and then, you know, because all the devotees were so used to having this sangha that they were like, well, we have to do something, and then so those two spun off of that. But it was great. Like, so while we were at it, you know, while the preaching center was going full force, you know, we had people coming from, you know, the local area. There's college there, Monmouth University, and we had a schedule where every day of the week, except for one day, we had a program. So ours was Friday night in Long Branch, and then Saturday we would go to Tawako because they would have a separate Saturday feast and Sunday feast. Saturday was more for like the younger crowd.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
And then on Sundays we would alternate between Brooklyn Temple and Philadelphia Temple. So we had this big van. We would just take people Sunday.
Yeah.
Monday was the only day off. Tuesday we went to 26 Second Avenue. Wednesday we went to Govinda's in Philadelphia. Thursday back to Second Avenue again, and then Friday again we're back in Long Branch.
Amazing.
And we had, you know, like I said, college kids, and there were kids from like Red Bank. We had a good crew, and like I said, every day of the week except for one day, we were, you know, out just, you know, immersing them in Krishna conscious activities.
That's awesome. It's amazing those times were really like happening, that 90s, the mid 90s, like
Yeah.
all these people joining and all these different you're talking about programs every single day of the week. That's crazy. It's funny how that works. It's kind of like it's like a cycle of, you know, the younger generation kind of comes in, and then when things need to stabilize, then they become a little slower. But then as another generation comes in, at least that's how I think it will happen. But so then after that, what was your kind of next stage in your life?
So after that, when the preaching center ended, I got this. I call it a half a realization. I got this half a realization that, because, you know, Brihad Bhanu Prabhu, my godbrother, and I, we were co-running this center. So he was taking care of all the financial stuff, and I was taking care of like the preaching part and like the organization. And at one point, he wasn't into doing that anymore, and so, you know, that was it for that. And so my half realization, and it's a bad one actually, was that if I wanted to do a preaching center, I couldn't rely on anybody, right?
Mm.
And so, and I call it half a realization because we can get to that in a minute, but, you know, and it's true, you can't rely on anybody. But the reason it was a half realization is because I thought I had to rely on myself.
Mm.
I didn't. I actually had to rely on Krishna, but it took me 10 years to figure that out. So what I did was I thought, okay, well, I want to do a preaching center, obviously. I'm going to have to fund it. So, you know, I'm not going to go out and ask for donations because I'm not good at that. So I was like, I'm going to have to get a job where I can, you know, still run a preaching center. So I thought, all right, I'll become a teacher. It's part of my nature, and I'll have weekends off in summers, and that's when we can do the programs and like that. So I got a job and saved up to go to college, and so I worked for 2 years in retail, and I was a retail manager for almost 2 years
Wow.
until I had enough to like start college, and then I went to college for 3.5 years, and then again I decided that wasn't the route for me, so I dropped out.
3.5 years.
3.5 years, yeah. I was so I had the student teaching semester and then one more like half a semester to do, and that would have been it for me. But
But you're like, nah, I'm out of here.
it was it. No, because I'm more into education reform than I
I
am
see.
education. Like the way the systems run now, it's not good. So, and you can't just be a teacher and fix it. You have to either be it's a whole thing. You have to get
Right.
tenure, or you have to be an administrator. And so being a teacher wasn't gonna really help me. I would have either gone crazy or got fired or quit. Something would have happened where it wouldn't have been a good career for me.
Right.
So, so then I had to I went through several jobs after that to pay off my student loans, because those are really expensive.
Yeah. Gosh.
But once I got through that, I was able to start saving up, and and uh, and that's where we are now with it's called the Bhagavat Commune. It's I have 60 acres in rural Kentucky. The first time I owned this property was 12 years ago, and then actually I sold it at one point because we needed a bigger property, and then something happened there. Anyway, I got it back. So
Oh wow, you got it back after selling it.
yeah. It's Krishna's. I mean, he's in charge of everything. So
Well, before we get into the details of it, where was this idea conceived from? Like, did you always have an inclination for like, doing this commune and kind of living off the land and things?
So that actually evolved. So when I went to Vrindavan to take Bhakti Shastri in '95, you go through that course and you're like, okay, I got to preach, and it was Prabhupada Centennial. So it was like, we really got to preach. It was just,
Yeah.
this is the mood. This is what we got to do.
Yeah.
So it was, so the idea was preaching center focused on Shastric study, because, what I missed I was only in the temple for a year and a half. But what I missed was the Shastric study aspect of living in the temple. We didn't really get trained up the way you're meant to in a
Mhm.
temple. It was sort of like, it was emergency situation. There was a lot of service that needed to be done. So that's what we did. And anytime we started like a Shastra study group, it would last about 2 sessions, and then something would happen where some of the devotees couldn't come, and we'd put it off till the next week. And then we never got traction on any of it. So
Right.
there wasn't that training. So after I went through and got Bhakti Shastri, I said, okay, well, I'm going to do a preaching center, and it's going to be focused on Shastric study, because if we don't have good backing, we don't have a good foundation, we're not going to stick around very long. Or if we do, we're not going to be satisfied, and we're not going to make much spiritual progress.
That's a really good point. Now.
So it was all about the Shastric study. And as time went on, I realized that, and as I started studying more, so I took Bhakti Shastri. Then in like 10 years later, I took Bhakti Vaibhav when it finally became available. And so as that went through, I realized that, well, if you want to do a Shastric study program, it's best to do it in a natural environment, away from distractions. You're in nature. There's nothing there that's telling you that Krishna is not in control, whereas if you're in the city, there's all sorts of things saying that, this is in control, that's in control, do this, do that.
Wow, I really like that point. That's like really deep.
Yeah,
That having an environment which is just nature, you feel like Krishna is more in control than in a city where there are so many things that are trying to control.
yeah, they're pulling attention away from Krishna. When you're in nature, it's not doing that. I mean, you can be distracted in nature, absolutely, but there's not as much of a competition for attention.
Wow, I love that. That's deep. Awesome.
I mean, it's just sattva guna. It's
Yeah.
Bhagavad Gita. So it's definitely a more favorable atmosphere. And then of course it's like, when you're studying Shastra, you want to apply it in your life. That's the most important thing. It's not
Yeah.
just that we can memorize it and spew it back to somebody. It's that we should apply it. And so then I thought, okay, well then in that case, we should also do as much as possible. Whatever we're doing should be engaged in Christian service. So everybody eats. So let's just try to, grow everything that we need to eat. That way, the whole meditative process is there. You get a seed, it's Krishna's. You put it in the ground, that's Krishna's. You water it with Krishna's water. It comes up. You take care of it because it's your service. You harvest it, and then you offer it lovingly to Krishna.
Beautiful. Yeah.
It's all connected. So every bit of your life can be connected like that if you have the right focus. And it's easier to do in the wilderness than it is in,
Right. So
But-
so this idea came about like early on, but it didn't materialize until you were like, okay, I got money saved up and now I need to like, why Kentucky or why that area of the US or even the world?
Yeah. So yeah, it took a bit to actually get the money because I was in debt for a while. And it actually, it's perfect the way it happened, because when I started studying Bhakti Vaibhav, I learned a valuable lesson from Bhishma Dev that, and that's where I got the rest of that half a realization I was telling you about.
Oh, okay.
He's there on his deathbed of arrows, and and Yudhishthir's having a rough day. He's like, man, I just killed my relatives and my teachers, and
Right.
and he's super bummed out about it, and nobody can like pull him out of that funk, even Krishna. So Krishna brings him to Bhishma Dev, who's there on his bed of arrows, right? And Bhishma Dev is just preaching to him Daivi Varnashram Dharma, right? Just, always engaging whatever you're doing, Krishna's service. And then at one point after he's straight up preaching, right? And then at one point, right before he leaves his body, he says, and part of the verse is, now let my thinking, feeling, and willing, which has so long been engaged in various occupational duties and activities, now be completely focused on Krishna. And I thought to myself, man, he was already focused completely on Krishna as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
And so if he's not satisfied with his level of, of being completely solely focused on Krishna, then I shouldn't feel satisfied one bit.
Right.
And then I also realized at that point that, that the other half of that realization that I can't rely on anybody. And I can't rely on myself either, because if I'm relying on myself, I think I'm doing the work. And, then you're really, that's not Krishna consciousness, that's self-consciousness. And I was doing it for a good cause, sure. I wanted to do it to preach Krishna consciousness, but the consciousness wasn't there. I wasn't Krishna conscious. I was Carucandra conscious, right? And so when I got that realization, it was great, because I did this sort of like test thing, because before that, I couldn't save money no matter what. Like I would put money aside and then I'd get some bill out of nowhere, right?
Oh, I hate those.
Or, there would be an accident. Something would happen where I couldn't put aside anything, no matter how hard I tried. So when I got this realization from Bhishma Dev, I said, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I got this box, just a little like fire safe box. And I said, okay, Krishna, this is yours. Obviously everything's Krishna's. Everything is his. And we only borrow, we take our quota. But I said, look, this is yours. Whatever I put in this box stays in this box. It's not coming out unless it's getting spent for you. And if bills come up, I'm not taking it. It's yours. This is yours. So I did that.
Right.
And I was tested a few times where, some bills would come up and like that. And I wouldn't take it from the box. I said, I'd sell something, or I'd, just pay the bill a little bit late, or whatever the case may be.
Somehow make it work.
And as soon as I did that, and obviously it wasn't just a one or two tests, it was several tests to see if I would, dip into that box. And I never did. And so when Krishna finally saw, okay, he's serious, he's, not going to touch it. Then within a season, I was able to get this property the first time.
Wow.
And it was all completely Krishna's arrangement. And all I had to do was step back and let him do it.
I love that point. Letting Krishna, not relying on yourself, but relying on Krishna. And you had to come to that realization after having a half realization some years ago, and then you had that full realization. I just want to kind of get a little bit deeper into that before we go into the details of the commune. But how would someone who's like me, how would I do that practically in my life? Not to like a more general practical way of how I can be less me consciousness and more Krishna conscious, in the sense of seeing his hand in everything and not try to always hang on to control, because there's so much fear involved in that. Like when you lose control, so much fear, it's
Yeah, that's a great question, and it is the question, because that's what our movement's all about. It's all about redirecting our consciousness from being self-centric to being God-centric. And so anyone can do it. It doesn't matter where you're living or what occupation you have. Srila Prabhupada said all the time, Krishna consciousness is for everyone. So what it takes is, and what helped me, obviously studying the Shastra, thunder.
oh wow.
But confirmed.
Confirmed. I was just gonna say that.
Shastra.
Yeah.
Obviously studying Shastra, but then what really helped me was I would examine how much time or what I spent my time on throughout the day. So there's 24 hours in a day. We sleep for a certain amount, and then but in our waking hours, we do so many different things. Like, so most people have to work, right? And so they do their job, and then they have recreation time that they put aside, and so they have full schedule, right? And all of these things that we do can be connected to Krishna. But until we realize how to do that, until we see actually how to do it, because everything is Krishna, everything's just part of Krishna. But we see it through our own eyes and see how things serve us instead of how it's supposed to be used to serve Krishna. So until we can actually get that realization and start engaging all of our daily activities in Krishna service, what we can do is just see, okay, what percentage of the day, or how many minutes or hours, seconds even, do I actually think of Krishna? And am I striving to actually serve Krishna? And we find that in the beginning, sometimes even when we're chanting japa, we're not doing that. We're doing it out of a sense of duty, and we're distracted. We're thinking of so many other things. And so you don't even count that, hour and a half, 2 hours necessarily, unless you're actually focused.
Yeah.
Start seeing like what actually connects me. So for some people it's kirtan, for some people it's prasad. Different people have different things where they actually feel that connection to Krishna, and they feel that they can step back and just do that. So what I always recommend is find that first, and then just increase that throughout your day. Like, so if you do that for, like, let's say 5 minutes a day, okay, do it for 5 minutes a day, but never miss it,
Yeah.
Always do that for, put that time aside, and then just gradually increase it and take notice of how your life is changing. Right. And so after that, so that's the first step is like whatever you do that you feel actually a connection to Krishna. Not that makes you feel good necessarily, but that you actually feel, okay, I'm doing this for Krishna.
Everyone has something specifically that they might. Yeah. And
then so after doing that for a while, the next thing is to bring in study of Shastra. And there's no thunder for that one, but that's a very important thing. So Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra are the three most important things. And it turns out they're all actually the same thing as Shastra, because Guru only talks about Shastra, the Sadhus only talk about Shastra, and Shastra. So it's Shastra in three different forms, right?
Right.
And so it's like the most important thing in our philosophy, because it's what educates us. So obviously chanting is the most important thing also. The Chaito Darpana Marjana, it clears the consciousness so that we can see things. But then once that consciousness is clear and we can start seeing things as they are, the way we know if we're perceiving something correctly or not is through Shastra. It's not just, I have a feeling that this is true. No, it has to be confirmed through Shastra. So taking time to just read Shastra, whether it's alone or whether it's with a group, preferably with a group, because it's more dynamic. You can sort of play off of each other's realizations. but that's a thing that it helps a lot. So if, like I said, if you do it for, even if you start for like 10 minutes a day, that's hardly any part of the day,
Mm-mm.
But if you do that, and even when it's hard to do, like, got a lot of other things going on, or your favorite podcast is on, you want to listen to that, or whatever the case may be. No, this is the time that I set aside and I'm going to do it. And so being determined and kind of like relentless in this is what we need to do. And then gradually we start seeing things clear, and then we get these, since we start seeing things actually as they are, we can start using things properly in Krishna service. So that's basically how anyone can, gradually redirect their consciousness from self-consciousness to Krishna consciousness.
Wow. So just to review, I would say the first thing from what you were saying is that find something that that inspires you, some spiritual activity, and do that a little bit per day, and don't miss it, and try to increase it. And secondly is to study Shastra.
Yeah.
With a group perhaps, or even alone. I think the fact that that's part of your steps is that means it's really important. And I feel like, did you have personal experience of that changing your life, studying deeply?
Absolutely. So like I said, when in 95, I went and took Bhakti Shastri, and that changed my life, because it was like, there were things that I knew sort of about the philosophy,
Yeah.
but it wasn't confirmed, so it didn't have the authority, right?
Mm.
So knowing where it comes from and how to apply it, that was like a very important thing for me. But after that, like I said, I was still having partial realizations, right? I
Right.
knew that I couldn't depend on anybody, but I was still depending on myself. So it took more study. So as soon as I started studying again, and this was as soon as Bhakti Vaibhav was available, is when I started, when I took it. And as soon as I did that, it's just Krishna just gives you these realizations, if you let him. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden it's like, oh, I thought I was practicing Krishna consciousness for over a decade, and really I was not really,
Mm.
I was appreciating Krishna. I was chanting japa. I was following the principles. But I wasn't actually dedicating my life to him. I wanted to, and I thought I was working my way up to that, but I wasn't doing a really good job of it. And so when I started studying Shastra, it became clear that, oh, okay. And then we see this all the time. I travel around a lot, and everywhere I go and give class, I ask this of the people, if they've ever experienced, where, like a plateau in their Krishna consciousness, like they've made some advancement, and then they just reach this point where it seems that, they're not really making so much advancement anymore. They're sort of like on this plateau.
Yeah.
And everywhere I go, people are like, yeah, I've experienced that. And so I know it wasn't just me, and I know it's a common thing. And this is the material world. So this is, this is what our conditioning, dictates us to feel, that, we can only see things through our own eyes. And
Right.
that's the consciousness of anyone in the material world. So to change that, it takes something powerful. And so chanting and the holy name, and also studying Shastra.
You're saying that someone who may be feeling a plateau in their spiritual life, they just need to like ramp up the hearing and chanting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. So I remember some years ago you were living in New Jersey for some amount of time, and then you would go to Mayapur for some amount of time, and then come back again. And someone told me, "Oh yeah, Charucandra is going 6 months here. That's like the life." Tell us a little bit how you kind of did that, and why did you do that?
So, yeah, when I told you about the that box that I had that I put aside, so that was right after my first season. I was living in New Jersey for half of the year. I was working at in like a tourist town. I was doing art.
Yeah.
And so after my first year working there, I was finally able to sort of like pay off my debts. And then Bhakti Vaibhav, of course, was finally available. And I was meant to take it in Vrindavan. And I had my ticket, I paid for, like, everything was ready. And a week before the course started, or was supposed to start, I get a message from Vrindavan, and they were like, "Hey, we're not doing the Bhakti Vaibhav because there weren't enough students."
Oh,
And
man.
I got so ticked off, man. I was not equipoised in this situation. I was very angry.
Right.
You know, I wasn't in a position like I am now where, you know, I can let stuff roll off me. I was mad.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I called my guru up. I'm like, you know, what am I supposed to do? And, you know, they suggested, you know, the course is being run in Mayapur, so just go there, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, I already got my ticket to Delhi. Like, how? And the course started earlier, so like I'm missing part of it. I'm like, I was really angry.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, I made it happen. I got there, you know, and Krishna does this. He, you know, he puts these little austerities before us to see how determined we are. Like, is he actually going to do it? Let's throw a few obstacles and see, like, are you really interested in studying Shastra? Will you do what it takes? Like, what happens when you get mad because the course is canceled? Are you just going to, you know, stomp off, or, you know, you're going to figure it out? So luckily I wasn't that much of a jerk, and I went and I took it in Mayapur. And at this point, like, I didn't even look like a devotee. Like, I had this long beard because I was, you know, I was doing this kind of work. And, you know, I had my shikos up front. I had bangs instead of back. And yeah, I didn't even really look like a devotee. And it was like whatever. It's like, because it's an external thing, it doesn't matter. It's how I felt comfortable.
Yeah.
And so I went, and, you know, I was like, oh, geez, I guess I should cut off my goatee if I'm going to Mayapur and taking this course. Because honestly, when I was going to Vrindavan, I wasn't going to do it. I was like, whatever. Like, people are in Vrindavan and they look funky. It doesn't,
Right.
you know? And so when I realized I was getting moved to Mayapur, I asked my guru. I said, look, you know, I have this goatee for a reason. It's because back then when I shaved, I looked like I was like 12 years old.
Mm.
And so the work I was doing, it wasn't beneficial for me to look like I was 12 years old, right?
Right.
And so I told him, I was like, you know, I have it for a reason. I'm sort of attached, but if you want me to cut it, because I'm representing you, I'm there as your disciple. If you want me to cut it off, I'll cut it off. And he said, well, you don't have to, but it'd be better if you did. So I did. Cut it right off.
Yeah.
And so I took the course, and then Bhishma Dev, like I said, you know, knocked me upside the head and said, dude, like, you're not even anywhere near focused on Krishna. So don't even try to play like you are, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, got it. Check, you know, and just studying Shastra gives you this realization that, oh, you know what? I haven't been doing it right. You know, that's why it wasn't working. And this goes back to when I was little, you know, and I saw that people, you know, they weren't doing it right, you know, and that's why it didn't have any appeal to me. And so, and that's why Krishna consciousness wasn't really having a huge effect on me at the time. So when I was able to do that, I was like, okay, bam. And then, you know, just like that, immediately the advancement started coming, you know? And so that was that first year that I went to Mayapur in that time. And it had such an impact on me. I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to go every year, because Bhakti Vaibhav, it's not just like a one-time course. It's
It's really long.
Years.
Yeah.
So I think it was, I guess, four years at the time. They might be 3 now.
Mm-hmm.
But so I kept going. And so what I did was, like I said, when I was in Jersey, I worked. It's a seasonal job. I worked in the summertime, so I was there for 6 months, and then I go to Mayapur for 6 months. And so just, you know, going through Bhakti Vaibhav, and then when I finished Bhakti Vaibhav, they actually didn't have it standardized yet, so we didn't really graduate. There were only 2 of us that actually made it through all of it, and
really?
We didn't graduate yet because they didn't have it standardized yet. So it wasn't really a thing yet. So we actually had to wait another 2 years. Sorry about the thunder, man.
That's okay. You're out in the you know, Central Laguna over there.
So when I finished the Bhakti Vaibhav course, they didn't really have plans for a Bhakti Vedanta course.
Right.
And so I thought, well, I've got my winters and falls free. I'm just going to keep going to Mayapur. And I offered the MI. I said, look, if you want, maybe get a couple of other devotees too together, and we'll just put the coursework together for you. We'll study it and then we'll put it together. And at the time, the MI had somebody that was on it, I guess. They said, yeah, we have somebody that's doing it. I said, okay, that's fine, no problem. But I did it anyway myself, because, at the Bhagavat Commune here, I want to offer those courses here in America, all of the Shastric study courses. So I thought, all right, well, I'll make the curriculum for my school in Kentucky. And so I kept doing that, and I was writing the curriculum for the Bhaktivedanta course, the second half of the Bhagavatam. And one year when I was there, it was probably maybe the third year into that, Bhakti Brihat Bhagavat Maharaj, he was Brihat Mridanga Prabhu at the time.
Yeah.
He was actually staying next to me. So when I'd go there to study, I'd stay in the senior brahmachari ashram in Mayapur. And so he was in the room next to me, and we shared a veranda. So sometimes we were out on the veranda, and he'd see me, and he asked, hey, what are you doing? I see you here every year. Are you taking the Bhakti Vaibhav? And I said, no, actually, I already did that. But now I'm studying Bhaktivedanta. And he said, really? What material are you using? And I said, oh, no, I'm actually making study guides for it, so that I can teach it later.
Wow. And
he said, well, do you mind if we use that? Can we use it for the MI? And I said, yeah, if you want, you can use it. Sure, no problem. So, yeah, by the time I finished it, that's what they use now. I mean, they probably made a couple of adjustments to it, but so they use.
We were there at the same time, I think, right? When I was doing the deity worship course, and I think you were doing some course as well, right? Or you were teaching or something.
So that year, that was when I was working on the Bhaktivedanta stuff, and I was also teaching some of the Bhakti Vaibhav course.
So do you have the title of Bhaktivedanta since you did it already, or?
No, I have the title of Bhakti Vaibhav, but they don't give honorary certificates at the MI.
Okay.
I don't have the Bhaktivedanta, but I've also studied through the Mayapur Gurukul, and then I started doing a service there, because once I finished doing that seva for Mayapur Institute, then the Bhaktivedanta Academy, I made some friends there.
Yeah.
And they said, hey, do you want to do that again? What you just did? Go through Bhagavatam again and make a study, like a different format, obviously.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, man, let's do it. So I ended up helping out. I wrote a decent chunk of their coursework for the Srimad Bhagavatam, and then I'm almost finished with their coursework for the Chaitanya Charitamrita. I did it. I'm on the last book, so I just have to finish up the Shikshastika, and then it's finished.
Wow, what an accomplishment! For those listeners who don't know, Srila Prabhupada gave some instructions to devotees about standardizing and studying, his books, Srimad Bhagavatam, like in a very, nice and structured way, and whoever did that, it was like first Bhakti Shastri, then Bhakti Vaibhava, then Bhakti Vedanta, and if you finish that, you get the title. It is a letter where he's like, we will give out the title. What's that?
Bhakti Sarvabhauma is after that, the Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Oh, right, Bhakti Sarvabhauma. Right, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So very interesting. So then, now let's talk a little bit about the details about the commune, because why Kentucky?
So I was looking for property that was, first of all, I needed it to be free from distraction. So far enough away from, the hustle and bustle.
Yeah.
I needed it to be affordable, because I'm not moneybags. And I needed it to be, I wanted a year-round stream that ran through it. I was hoping that I could get some sort of waterfalls and caves, which I got. And I needed a place that didn't have building restrictions or like codes, because I want to build a lot of stuff, natural buildings. And, if you try to do that in a state like New Jersey or Pennsylvania, New York, maybe in upstate, you might be able to get away with it. But there's so many different restrictions and permits that you have to get. And it's just really, it's not like the permits that I was worried about. It's the money for the permits, It's just like, It costs so much to do all these things. So it took me a while to find this property. I was looking everywhere from Maine all the way down to Georgia, and then inland all the way, I was looking pretty much everywhere. And, looking online, and then I'd visit properties in person. And I probably looked at, like, actually visited at least 50 properties. And when I finally found this one, it checked off every box that I had. It has, there's actually a river that runs through it. It has this cool tunnel that you have to drive through to get here. That it's actually the boundary of my property. It used to be an old railroad tunnel. And then there's another tunnel that the creek runs through. And there's waterfalls all over the property. And it's so peaceful that, it was like when I got here, I knew it was the place. And so it didn't bother me that, because like when I went to study Shastra, I had to fly to India. And so I thought, well, people don't have to fly to India. They can take a short road trip, or they can even fly here if they want. But
yeah,
but it's far enough away from the distractions, and it's a nice sattvic atmosphere. And there's not too many distractions where, people would just be focused on something else.
Wow. So that's amazing. How far is it from New Jersey driving?
So it takes, I drive kind of fast. It takes me 8 hours from northeastern Pennsylvania, probably 9. When I used to drive from Wildwood, New Jersey, it took between 9 and 10 hours.
So I want to talk about this Hobbit, what you call the Hobbit house?
Yeah.
So for our listeners, I mean, I wish we could show you this. I should have kind of prepared this beforehand, but we'll connect you with Charchandra Prabhu Facebook.
I'll send you some pictures and you can pop them up.
Yeah. So he created, so I'll tell you what my conception of it, and then you can tell me what the real thing is.
Sure.
So there's a cliff, like kind of an overhang, like a cave. And then within that cave, Charchandra Prabhu created like his own little house, like a room with a stove, all made out of rocks, and then basically closed off the cave with like a huge circular door and like stained glass windows and things like that. And there's a waterfall nearby. So you stayed there for some amount of time with no technology or running water or anything. Tell us about that. That's so fascinating.
Yeah. So for a full year, I stayed. So it took 7 months to build. First off, I lived in a tent while I was doing that. But then once it was built, I took an entire year. It was from the end of May of 18 to the end of May of 19. And I didn't use any electricity the whole year. I didn't use anything powered by gasoline. And all I did was study Chaitanya Leela, because that was when I transitioned from writing study guides for Srimad Bhagavatam to writing study guides for Chaitanya Charitamrita. And so I told the school, I said, look, I mean, I've read Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, but I haven't studied it. So I don't feel comfortable writing a study guide for it.
Yeah.
Until I go and like delve into it and actually study it. So that was what I did that year. I studied Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita twice, Chaitanya Bhagavat once, and then I went through Chaitanya Mangala, and basically just, got to know Lord Chaitanya.
Oh, so let's look at this.
Oh,
I'm able to share the screen here. So hold on, how do we go to the next one now? Okay, so this is the overhang we're talking about, right?
Yeah, that's what it looked like, before I built anything. And there it is, just from another angle. And then, so you see those little holes in the rock here?
Yeah.
That's just made with, it's called a star chisel. It's kind of shaped like a Phillips head screwdriver, but it's a chisel. And then you use that sledgehammer and you just keep hitting and turning and pouring water in it, and it drills a hole. And then once you have a line of holes like that, you put these metal wedges in and you bang on those. Oh, there they are. And so you bang on those, and then it just splits the rock open. It makes a nice straight line.
Oh my goodness. Fantastic.
So
what were you trying to do with, why were you trying to split this?
So to make stones to actually build with. So first of all, that slab was actually inside of where the house is now.
Uh-huh.
So I was both removing the material that I needed to remove, and I was also creating the material that I used to build the walls.
I see. Okay. There's a number of pictures, so there's the real cool stuff coming up. But for our listeners who are just listening to just the audio, I'm really sorry, but you're not able to see this. But you can go to his Facebook page and see these pictures, I assume. I think they're public. So this is the splitting of the rock.
Yeah, so
Wow,
that's
it's such a straight line.
It's 6 foot by 2 foot by 4 foot. That slab that I split off there.
Oh my
That's
goodness.
the first one I ever split off. And if you look at the top left there, there's sort of like a green rock there.
Yeah.
That bit's still there. That's actually my bed. That's where I sleep now.
Are you living here right now at this moment?
Yeah, actually, right now I'm staying in a tent again because I'm building another house, and I'd like to be very close to what I'm working on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm there on the property right now. I'm in the neighbor's house. So yeah, so after I split off that big slab, you cut it off into smaller slabs the same way.
Yeah.
And then those became the foundation stones for the wall.
What's
and
this?
this is great. So one day, so I'm digging this foundation ditch under this rock overhang, and one day it starts raining, like it's raining right now.
Yeah.
And so the next morning I go to work on the hobbit house again, and I see that the foundation ditch is full of water. I was like, oh no! What? I was like, how is it possible? Because it's underneath the rock overhang, so the rain couldn't have blown in like that.
Right.
And I'm freaking out because I'm like, I'm building a house and it's just going to fill up with water.
Yeah.
So I start looking around and I realize that there's just a little hole. It's like 5/8 of an inch. You could like stick your thumb in it, and it's kind of like, sort of like in the top left. There's like a little crack that goes down, and then there's like a little hole. You can kind of see it. Anyway, the water was only coming from there. So what I did was I built a stone box to capture the water. And then I have pipes that divert that captured water into a cistern, a 150-gallon cistern. And so now I have 150 gallons of stored water inside of the hobbit house, and I use a hand pump and a sink to.
Oh my goodness! It just happened to be like that. It wasn't that you
absolutely
arranged
it's all
it.
Krishna's arrangement. So it was one of those things where at first I freaked out, and then I was like, oh, thanks. Now I have water.
Amazing. This is just okay. So if you look on the right side of your screen here, that's just the wilderness there on the side of that cliff. So you can kind of see on the left, the top left is where the overhang is.
So this fella, he's great. He lives about 6 miles away. His name is Mr. Chickadee. And he has a YouTube channel, Mr. Chickadee.
Oh.
He like makes his own tools, and he's like a really good natural builder. Amazing.
Wow. So how did you connect with him?
He actually, after I sold the property the first time, I sold it back to the person I bought it from, and then he actually bought it from that fellow.
Oh.
And so when I bought the property back, I bought it back from this guy.
Oh, I see.
And because he had a similar issue I did before is when the river that runs through it, when it rains like it is now, the water comes up really high, and a lot of the land, like on the roadside, becomes flooded. So even though most of the land is, it's on the other side of the river and it's way higher and there's no problem there, it's not as accessible as the roadside. So when he found that out, he was like, I can't do my project here, and so. He sold it to me, so I got it back.
Wow. So he built this?
Yeah, so he helped me build that. It's a timber frame door frame. That's the one door frame.
This looks like something, there's a drain here.
Yeah, so this is, what you're looking at now is the subfloor. The current floor is actually over a foot above that. So what I did was I made a subfloor with a drain, and there's a whole lot of gravel under there now. So if any moisture gets trapped in there or water comes in, it runs down through that drain and gets emptied outside underneath what the actual floor is right now.
Oh, I see. Smart. This is what's this pipe in the center? Yeah,
so you can see that the pipe, that's the drain for the sink. And then the other pipe on the left is the one that feeds. I have another cistern that sits underneath the sink. It's just a 10-gallon one, and that's what the pump is connected to.
So that's the view from looking out. It's like this beautiful, just wilderness. What's the climate like there?
I mean, it's cooler, but it's pretty humid.
It's humid.
This house I built obviously it's in a cave, so it's humid, but it's also on the north face, so it's more humid.
Yeah.
Because of the proximity to the waterfall, I just, I couldn't resist.
Yeah.
So I just had to build there.
So you build. So where does this mortar come from? Did you make it yourself, or you bought it, or?
Yeah. Well, I made it myself. You have to buy part of it. So you buy Portland cement, and then you mix that with sand. All the sand I got right there from underneath that overhang.
Mm-hmm.
So it's 3 parts sand, 1 part Portland cement, and then you mix it with the right amount of water. And
You could see it coming together now. That's where the door. But that's not the circular door, right? That's
no,
another
that's
door.
the other door, the back door.
Back door. Okay. Looks like you're using local lumber here.
Yeah. So this was all. I had to clear a place for where I have a shipping container where I store all my tools and stuff.
Yeah.
So when I had to clear that area to get that dropped off by the road, I had to cut down a few poplar trees. And so what I'm doing here in this picture, you can see there's a squared off piece of log. It's called a timber. And that tool next to it that looks sort of like a hoe.
Yeah.
It's called an adze. It's very sharp.
Uh-huh.
So that's what you use that's what I used in this particular application to make a round log square. And so this was for, I framed out an area around where the cistern is inside, and that's all made of hand hewn lumber. You can see how that.
Oh my God, that's a lot of work. Wow.
And then they are squared off. All right, and then there, I actually had to form them, that one and the next one, to actually to fit up against the rock up top.
Oh my goodness.
And then it all fits. You can see the little notch there.
Oh my gosh.
And so it all just fits perfectly up in there.
You're just covering the water tank?
Yeah, just to make that sort of like a separate room. And then there's the other water tank for the sink now.
ATV.
Yeah, so while I was building, I did use some technology.
Right.
Obviously.
Oh, this is cool. I remember seeing this. This is like the top of the doorway, right? You had to kind of get the perfect rocks together to make an arch.
Yeah, you need to make that. Well, that middle one's the most important one, the keystone. That's for the smaller stained glass window. That one.
Right.
So I did that one, the smaller stained glass window, and then I did an arch for the door after that, and then one for the big window after that.
Oh, there's the pump that you're talking about, hand pump.
Yeah.
Okay, tell us about this. This is fantastic. So who did this?
So I have a friend. Her name is Maria Sams, and she actually lived near Adikarta Prabhu, and his wife had a farm project also in Kentucky.
Right.
This is when I was at the other property in Kentucky, and close to their farm was just like a mile and a half down the road was this lady Maria. And she has a stained glass studio. So we became friends. I met through them. And, we've kept in touch over the years. And when I wanted to build this house, I really wanted to have this stained glass window. So I asked her, if she would build it for me. And I actually did a trade. I didn't even have to pay for it. I did a trade.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so I got that, and then the bigger stained glass window, which you'll see later. I asked her, since she's in glass, I asked her if she knew of a place where I can get plexiglass, because the big one is 6 foot round, it's big, and so I was just asking her if she had a source to get plexiglass. Yeah. She said, "Yeah, I do, but what are you going to use? What are you using it for?" And so I told her, and she said, "Well, why don't you just do that in stained glass also?" And I said, "That's big." I was like, that's a lot of trade. And she's like, "Well, I need it." So I just did a whole bunch of art for her, and then she made that for me.
Wow. Wood burning stove definitely needed during the winter.
Yeah, absolutely. So that wood burning stove actually was donated by another neighbor I became friends with. He's a disabled veteran. And when he found out that I was building a hobbit house in the woods, he said, "Well, tell me, how are you gonna stay warm?" And I said, "Well, I'm gonna put a wood stove in there." He said, "Do you have it yet?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, don't get one." And I said, "Okay." And he went out and got me one.
Amazing.
Really nice neighbors.
It's really cool how people become so excited about like a project like this when it's like actually a very simple thing, but it's like such an out of the ordinary thing.
Yeah, yeah. Somehow, so I've been working on this for a while. Not this, but the project Bhagavat Commune.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I had some people coming. I had, we had a few festivals. There were like 35 devotees there, but it never really started kicking off until I built this hobbit house, and then all of a sudden people were really interested. I guess because then they see the application of it. It's not just hearing about it; it's actually seeing how you can build something out of natural materials and live a simple life.
Right. So if you see here in this picture, here's the overhang, and then it's starting to get closed in now by the different rocks and mortar and things, which is really cool. What's this?
So this is that ends up becoming the outside window frame of the big stained glass window. So it's a circular window, so you have to make a big wooden circle. But the easiest way to do that is first make a big wooden octagon,
right,
and cut that into a circle. So these are the so you can see the inside of the octagon on the bottom one.
Yeah. And
then on the outside you can see where I've cut off the circle.
Oh, I remember seeing these pictures. This was super cool.
This is so the inside, those 4 inside pieces, those are hemlock.
Right, hemlock, right.
Those are like 3 of them are within eye shot of the Hobbit house, and then one of them is still on my property, but a little further away. And this, I don't know if you recognize this particular pattern. Maybe, do you?
It looks familiar for some reason.
Okay, well, it's from Doctor Strange.
Oh, okay. I have not seen that.
Well, so I knew of it from the comic book. Anyway, that's
I see. Okay,
marked with that, but it's in the movie too. But yeah,
so you built this. So this is the big door, right?
The big one is the form for the window.
The window.
The small circle to the right, that is what becomes the door. That's a.
Oh, okay.
So I wanted it to be a small door because it's a hobbit house.
Right.
So it's 4 foot round. So you have to duck to get in it.
Oh, okay.
But it's one of those things where when you walk up onto it, you're like, oh my man, look at that. It's a hobbit house.
Oh, fantastic. That is so. What was the significance of having another door?
So I wanted to have that back door. There's my mom helping out. So I wanted to have that back door because then it faces the waterfall.
Right.
And I put a deck back there also. And I didn't have enough room to make another round door there. So I just did that rectangular one.
So what did your mom think of and your parents think of all this?
So my parents absolutely love it. My mom comes and visits a lot. My dad, while I was building it, came and helped a couple of times. Right now he can't get around so much. There's him. That's my dad. He was helping me build a walking bridge.
Wow.
Actually rode the 4-wheeler over that a couple of times. But no, they love it. They love it.
What did they think about when you became a devotee though?
So when I first became a devotee, it was the early 90s and they didn't know much about it. So at first they were a little freaked out. Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because, and ironic a little bit, first we would just have all these conversations and like sort of arguments. And then eventually when I went off to art school, I was away in Pittsburgh and my mom got a hold of Monkey on a Stick.
Oh no.
And, right. We say, oh no, but actually, like I said, it was ironic because she read it, the whole thing. She didn't just read parts of it and get like freaked out and say, you've joined a cult. She called me up one day and, she had that concern in her voice. And I said, okay, what's up, Ma? She said, and, cause I was living in Pittsburgh, which is close to New Vrindavan.
Yeah. Right.
And so that made her a little more nervous. So she said, so tell me, who's your guru? And I said, oh, well, Ravindra Swarup Prabhu. And she said, oh, William Deadweiler. Yeah, he helped kick out those corrupt guys. I like him. I was like, all right. And at that point, honestly, I didn't know about the corruption. Like,
right.
I heard a little bit about it, but like I didn't, so she knew more about it than I did.
Wow.
But she read about my guru and Monkey on a Stick, and she approved of what he was doing.
It's so ironic.
Yeah. but now, now they really like what I do.
Yeah.
Because they see that it's a really healthy lifestyle, and
Mm-hmm.
I've grown a lot since I became a devotee. I've become much calmer, much more reasonable.
Mm.
I mean, pretty much any quality I have now, I didn't have any of those back then.
Wow.
So it's all because of the process of devotional service.
Right. So we see here, like everything's almost fully closed in here, and that circle there is going to be a big stained glass window that we saw with that Doctor Strange.
Right. Yeah. So first you have to make a form so you can get the rocks to go in and stay, and then that keystone keeps it from collapsing.
Right.
And then you can take the form out and put that in. So this is the frame of the 4-foot door.
Okay.
So you can see I used trees right from the property. You saw the live edge.
Right. Well, this is almost fully enclosed.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, this is the inside. Looks so cool inside. Wow.
Yeah. So this is so now you can see the gravel on the ground. So that's before I did the mud floor, but that's underneath that about a foot is where that was. And that's my sister also. So my sister and mom helped me put that window in. We carried it down and we got it set in place, and then my mom, beat it in with a hammer as I held it in place.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yep, that's my sister.
Oh, there's the door. It looks really good.
Yeah, there's the door. That's the window without glass in it. And then, so there's me installing the chimney.
All right, you need the exhaust.
Yeah. And
door.
Then, cutting the circle for the door. There's the door.
Look at that.
There it is once it's sealed. Yeah.
Amazing. How do you circulate air if it's hot?
So there's two vents. You can see one of them just above, so up into the left of the big window.
Right
and
here.
There's another one just up and to the right of the chimney. Right there, those two. So that air goes through, but it's a cave, so it wants to stay 50 degrees at all times. It's got that geothermal insulation.
50 Fahrenheit all the time.
Yes, that's what it wants to stay. So if it drops below 0 outside, it'll go down to 40. 38 was the lowest it's been in there when it was below 0 outside. And when it's like 100 out, it'll get up to close to 70 in there, but not quite.
Wow.
So it actually feels like when you go in there, it feels like air conditioning, but it is humid.
Fantastic. I assume this is an altar.
It is, but so it didn't last very long. So like I said, it's humid in there. Yeah. So when I installed this, it's an altar for, I have a Hanuman deity that I make a garland for him every Tuesday.
Right.
A garland. So I made him this altar, and he was meant to live in there with me. And it's so humid in there that mold grew on that door.
Oh, I see.
It got wrecked, so I had to take it apart. And my Hanuman is also wood, so I couldn't bring him in there for that period of time.
Right.
So when I studied there, since it's humid, when I studied there, even I would only bring the books out when I was using them, and then I'd seal them away in plastic containers. Otherwise, they would have gotten soggy. So this is mixing the mud floor. So I did it like they do in West Bengal in Mayapur. It's cow dung, clay, sand, and water.
Wow.
And here it is finished, nice and smooth.
Amazing. What did you? Okay, this is before I ask you about what you ate. This is cool. Look at this. This is a design with tilaks on it, and I know because Charucandra Prabhu here is an artist, so I assume you did this art.
I did, yeah. So what I did was after I made that window, I traced out the 9 sections that I needed.
Yeah.
And then I laid the design out on the computer, just because it's symmetrical. But then I went and drew it in section by section.
Wow. And here I see icicles. Must be winter time.
That was January. And there I am. I had to make the rabbit on the window a little bigger because when Maria made the stained glass, she made it slightly larger than the.
Okay.
But there's
my goodness, that is fantastic. That's glass?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. How did you carry that down to where this is?
So, well, it's in 9 pieces. So.
Oh, I see. Gotcha. Okay, it's not in one piece.
Yeah.
Amazing. Look at that. Now, to all the listeners, would you go to this kind of effort to build your house in the woods? And if you say you wouldn't, why not? What's stopping you?
Why wouldn't you? You know.
Why would you? Yes.
And so the great part of this was like, you know, so like building this, you know, you're using rocks, right? These are Krishna's bones.
Yeah.
So they have structural integrity. And so like the whole process, and then you're using the trees, the hairs on his body. So like the whole process is very meditative. So what we're doing, this is my friend Josh. He came to help me build the back deck. So when you're doing this, it's like, it doesn't even feel like work, you know, it feels like seva. It feels like service.
Right.
So yeah, you know, it took 7 months, but like, honestly, it didn't feel like that. It felt
7 months is not that long, I think, to do this amazing job. I mean, this is going to stay here for centuries. It feels like the way you built it.
Oh, definitely. So the wood might give out, but all the stone will definitely be there. And I mean, most of the wood will stay, like the window and all that. But some of the interior wood, like the cistern box,
Yeah.
that's getting really moist. So
what did you eat?
So okay, for that year, I generally had like, it was a lot of like beans and rice and khichdi and stuff like that. Sometimes I'd make pancakes in the morning, stuff like that. But yeah, simple stuff.
Wow. Amazing. So you spent a year there with no technology or anything.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel like what am I, you know, I need to meet someone, or I need to get some interaction, whether it's with, you know, through you know, phone or Facebook or something? Like what's your realization just being like really isolated like that?
So, well, honestly, I thought I was going to be isolated, and I thought I wasn't actually going to talk the whole time, aside from chanting japa. I thought I was going to lose my voice, but I actually met a lot of people. So I got a lot of visitors, you know, like devotees and family, but also some locals. So there's a fellow who lives right just up the creek from me. And when he was young, his whole family would come down and play on that waterfall that's below me. They called it the Tumbling Rocks, and they'd go and just hang out there because it's, you know, it's just right down the creek from them. So one day while I was building the house, you know, this fellow comes, you know, walking down the stream, and he calls up to me, and I said, "Hey, how's it going?" And, you know, we started talking. I invited him up. He didn't come up that time because it was starting to get dark and he had to get home, but he came to visit another time. And then so I got to meet him. I got to meet his family. They actually invited me up for Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's. So actually, you know, they didn't want me to be alone. Like, I wouldn't have minded being alone, but I thought, well, you know, they're inviting me. It's nice. And, you know, they're really great people. So yeah, I got to talk to way more people than I thought. And they actually, that family started a church that's nearby. And so I had a bicycle. And so it was like 5 miles away. So they asked me this, you know, do you want to come and check out our church sometime? And I said, sure. Yeah, why not? You know, I like hearing about God. So yeah, so I went a bunch of times, you know, rode the bike out, made some friends there. You know, I'm really good friends with the pastor over there now. And oh, there's another person I met was there's this fellow who, he's an author. His name's Tim Callahan, and he writes books that take place in this area, this very area. And so my friends up the creek, they told me about it, and they're like, hey, there's this author who wrote a bunch of stories. They take place in the 60s, but they're about this area. And they said, you might want to read them because like some of it takes place on your property, like some of the stories.
Right.
And so I started reading them, and they do. It's like, so, you know, I'm reading these stories about these kids having all these cool adventures on my property.
Wow.
I thought, this is so rad.
Yeah.
So I sent the author a letter, and I was like, hey man, I'm reading your books. I'm a big fan, you know, and I actually live on, you know, the property where, you know, so-and-so in the book lives. And, you know, if you want to check out this house that I built, and I wrote down the information on how he can, you know, look on Facebook.
Yeah.
And so I sent that out, and within, I think it was 4 days, I got a letter back. And then within a week, he was there visiting.
Wow.
And
he was
so,
even mind blown. Like,
yeah. And then after that, so then we became really close friends, and he ended up in the story. He based a character off of me. He's a Native American guy named Katehekasa who builds a hobbit house. So my house is actually on the cover of one of his books.
Really?
Yeah. And
Oh my goodness.
yeah, so yeah, so I made a lot of friends, but honestly, I would have been okay without it. I would have been all right with it. But it was cool. It was cool that I got to meet all these really nice people.
Yeah. What are your future plans for the rest of the property? So you said you had something like 60 acres.
Yeah. So right now, I mentioned I'm building another house. This is going to be a timber frame house, which is on top of a cliff. So basically, the area, it's kind of like triangle shaped, and the two long sides, there's a 60-foot drop straight down, and then on the short side is just where the path comes in. And for a long time, I wanted to put a garden up there because it gets sun, and like everywhere else on my property, it's mountainous, so it's like it doesn't really. You'd have to clear a whole lot of trees to get a substantial amount of sun.
Right.
So I wanted to have a garden up there, and then I thought, well, I'm going to have to collect water because there's no water up there. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm going to build something. I may as well build like a guest house. And so I'm going to build a timber frame house. It's like a story and a half, and that way when guests come, if they're not into the austerity of staying in the humid hobbit house, they can stay in the timber frame house, which also won't have electricity, but it'll be quite a bit more comfortable than staying there. I mean, not as cool, but
Right.
yeah.
So who's going to live in that? Are you going to live in that house?
So sometimes maybe. So basically in the hobbit house, which I love, and I love staying in there, because like the best thing is when you wake up and the sun hits that stained glass window, it's like that's the first thing you see.
Wow.
So anybody that stayed there, that's like their favorite thing to wake up there. So I love it there, but like I can't hang up any artwork or have any books out or anything like that because it's so humid.
Yeah.
So the timber frame house, I'll be able to do that. I'll be able to like hang up the artwork. I've got lots of paintings that different devotees have made for me. Like Jayadev Prabhu made some artwork for me. I've got
Nice.
a lot of illustrations and stuff like that I'd love to put on display somewhere. And so I'll be able to do that and like keep books out on a shelf without worrying about it. But I mean, it will be a guest house. So whenever there's guests there, obviously I won't be there, but it would be a really great place to stay, especially in the winter. It faces south, so it gets sun. It's going to be very efficient, this one.
Wow. Very cool. How many square feet is that going to be?
This one, well, it's the downstairs is going to be 20 by 16. The upstairs is going to be 10 by 16.
Okay.
So whatever that is. So it's still fairly small, but
Right.
big enough.
Yeah. So what would you say to our listeners, how they could kind of, like, your goal is self-sufficiency, right? And to live off the grid. And is that your goal?
My goal is to connect everything to Krishna, and that's all of our goal, actually.
Right.
And so how that comes out on my end is, anything I build or anything. So, so I will try to grow all my own food, not to become self-sufficient. Just like, when I spent the year without electricity and gas powered stuff, it wasn't to like reduce my carbon footprint. That's like
Right.
it's like a happy side effect. Like,
Yes.
I'm glad that I did that. That's great.
Yeah.
But really it was, I needed to eliminate distractions so I could study Chaitanya Leela, and that's what it's all about. So my only goal is to rid myself of distractions, because that's what's keeping us from making spiritual advancement. And that's really all of our goals. That's, we just do it in different ways. And anybody can engage pretty much anything in Christian service. It's just, you have to figure out how that is done. And it's just easier to do in the woods, especially for me.
Wow. Yeah, because I thought you were going to say, "Oh, be self-sufficient, live off the grid," but you said connect everything with Krishna. That's really deep, and I think with that kind of mindset, I'm sure that fueled you like anything to do like what you did.
I mean, it's really well, it's not the only way to do it. It's the only way to do it successfully, though.
Right.
It's the only way to do anything successfully, honestly.
Yeah. What would you say to someone who wants to kind of do what you're doing, but can't take such a drastic way to do it because they have a family or they have certain engagements? What kind of little steps can they take to have a side effect of
So,
doing
yeah,
things less carbon footprint, but also doing things more naturally that they can think of Krishna more
yeah.
easier,
No,
right?
it's a great question because most people can't just disappear into the woods.
Yeah.
And it took me a bit before I could do it too. But um, my suggestion is that just as often as possible, for however long you can, go on a retreat where you're going to be focused spiritually. And so this is a Vaishnava retreat. I'm not saying they have to come here, but find a place that inspires you and go there as often as possible, and then just use that time to connect to Krishna, to get rid of the distractions and to truly connect with Krishna. Because then what happened is the taste increases. So
Right.
it's all there in our philosophy. You have
Right.
the Shraddha, then the Sadhu Sangha, then the Bhajana Kriya, and so it goes through. And so the taste can't develop if you're not trying, So whenever possible, you just got to do it. Find a place that inspires you, where you feel connected to Krishna, where you're away from the distractions. And we know what our distractions are. We know, if we have a seva, right, and maybe it's our favorite band or whatever. It's different for different people, but we know what our attachments are, and we'll sort of like drop or put off or do something, and we'll do that. So we know what they are. We
Yeah.
deal with them every day, and honestly, it takes up most of our days. We don't want to admit it. We'd like to say, oh, well, I appreciate that movie because, this particular person's in it and he has a tattoo of Krishna, so it's okay. Right? we want to justify things like that.
Yes.
It's not that watching movies is can't be Krishna conscious. You can actually watch a movie and take away something from it. Like
Yeah.
in the 11th canto, we learn from all different things in nature.
Right.
There's the 24 gurus. So
Right.
you can learn from a movie. It's just most people don't. So it's like but we know what our distractions are.
Yeah.
So if we consciously avoid those distractions and consciously focus on what actually inspires us in our Krishna consciousness, then we can make advancement. Then we can actually get that taste, and then it becomes spontaneous. Eventually, it becomes spontaneous. We do it automatically.
I feel like I'm gonna go my whole life just like being distracted and not ever getting taste. But what you're saying is that if you cut out the distractions, then it gives that chance for that taste to come in.
Absolutely. And it's just that, and like I said, even if it's like, a weekend out of the year at first, go and do something that is going to connect you to Krishna. You're not going to be distracted, where you honestly too, it's not something where, I'll go to a kirtan mela or something and, I'll gossip the whole time. Don't do that. Like if you're going to be absorbed at the kirtan mela, do that. I'm not knocking kirtan mela. It's great. I love it. But I'm saying like, it's not that we should choose something that we think is going to be good, but then squander it. Like,
Yeah.
we have to find things that we know we're going to be connected. We're not going to be distracted, and just do that. Even if it's, like I said, one weekend a year for a while until you get the taste, because the taste will come. And then, once the taste is there, you find time to do it, then it's a couple weekends, then it's a couple weeks, then it's a month. Then you realize that you don't really have to work a full-time job. You can work part of the year. And then after that, you can, it's just, things fall into place really nicely when this starts happening.
It's really a fantasy of mine to live in a place that's really quiet and to like raise my family and just try to be really in sattva gun, because here, like when I close my eyes at night, I hear the highway and that bothers me.
I hear
Like,
a waterfall.
what do you hear?
A waterfall.
Oh my gosh. I've been to places like when I went abroad and different places. Like I think we went to New Zealand. Yeah, it was in New Zealand, and we went camping for one night, and it was like near a mountain, and it was incredibly quiet. Like so quiet that it was bothering me how quiet it was because I'm not used to it. But it was so peaceful and so nice, And that's something I'm hopefully I'm working towards. And I think all devotees should, like you said, go on some kind of retreat where you can be with no distractions. Like you leave the phone at home. Everyone who you think is going to contact you, tell them that you're going to be off. When people didn't have phones, no one like people didn't die because they didn't have phones, you know? So I think there's a good time like to detox from technology even.
Absolutely. And that's another thing that during that year that I was unplugged, I got letters, and letters are so much better than, you know, anything else. They're better than emails, they're better than, because it's like people only say what's important in life,
Yes.
you know, for the most part.
Right.
I got a couple letters from my brother, my late brother, who was talking about the weather, and I'm like, dude, that was like a week ago. By the time I got it, he's talking about a storm coming in. So like,
Right.
sometimes you're still just talking whatever, but
Wow.
but it was nice that he kept in contact with me though.
Right. Well,
But for the most part,
what's that?
for the most part, you know, letters are just the best.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, Charucandra Prabhu, it was really a pleasure to hear about you. I mean, I've known you for a number of years, but I didn't know about this like very deep kind of background story, and I really, really appreciate it. And I hope all the devotees can be inspired by your story and to do their own part of to get free from distractions and focus on Krishna. And I think you're a great example of that. And I really appreciate that. Can you leave us, I don't want to put you on the spot, but leave us with some kind of concluding words, please?
Sure. So I know you're familiar with this because I heard you talk about it with another guest, that Srila Prabhupada at one point, he advised the devotees to boil the milk, right?
Right.
So that's what this project is, the Boil the Milk Project. And what that means is, you know, he saw that we were filling the temples up with devotees, but they weren't getting the cultivation that they need. They weren't studying Shastra like that. And so he said, you know what, do this. Don't worry about filling up the temples. We're not worried about quantity at this point. Let's worry about the quality. Let's really, you know, the ones that we have here, let's really, you know, get them to understand what Krishna consciousness is, apply it in their lives, because that becomes the best preaching. You know, when we apply the philosophy in our lives, people notice that and they see that it works. And like, that's the best form of preaching ever. And so, and it's funny because when I told my friends in Europe about, I have a lot of friends in Bulgaria that I know from Mayapur. When I told them about my project, they said, wait, so you're bridge preaching to devotees? And I was like, no. And then as I started explaining, I was like, actually, yeah, I guess I kind of am.
Oh, wow. Interesting. It's needed.
They don't have to do that there, because in Europe, it's like, in Bulgaria, at least, you know, you go out to these villages, and even like the people that come to the temple sometimes, like they fast on Ekadashi. I'm not talking grains and beans. I'm talking they fast on Ekadashi. So like they get the training.
Right.
You know, they have Bhakti Shastri courses every year. Like, every year when my Bulgarian friends come back from Mayapur, they give seminars. And then so every year there's Bhakti courses. And so like they have the training where you don't necessarily have to bridge preach to the devotees. But it's, I mean, it kind of is. Boil the Milk is kind of bridge preaching, because there's a gap that we have, we devotees who have found ourselves on this plateau and have want to move beyond it.
Yeah.
And we don't know how to make that connection because we haven't gotten it from Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra yet. So my message is, get that from Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, understand that gap, so that we can continue to redirect our consciousness from self-conscious to Krishna conscious. And that's our process. That's the only thing that we have to focus on, is changing consciousness.
Change of consciousness. Awesome. So cool. I want to have you again as your project develops, and I think devotees have really would love to see how it progresses. So if you want to follow Charucandra Prabhu, you can get him on Instagram. Here's his handle, Bhagavat.Commune. That's on Instagram. I hope you post on there because I know you just recently joined. And then you can find him on Facebook if you want to see all those pictures. Charucandra Dasa on Facebook. You can be friends with him and you can see what he's doing. And I hope you would put more progress there, that from what you're doing. It would be really nice for the devotee community to see. Again, thank you, Prabhu. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to turn the live off, but stay on.
Okay.
Krishna, Hare Krishna.